is communication versatility. And this is about improving your results with networking interviews, because it's something I learned when I was a coach and action coach. Was they said true communication is the response you get, meaning that you have a responsibility in your communication to help others understand what it is you're trying to say. And the best way to do that is to find a way that they understand it and share it with them in that their preferred mode of communication. So I learned this from social styles. It's a if you ever taken Myers-Briggs, or if you ever taken Insights, or any of these personality profiles, this is based off that same model. They have different words for the 4 different personality styles. But the key element that I want to share here tonight is how to modify your communication to someone that you're talking with, so that they can better understand, and the connection can resonate better, which will help them feel better about talking to you. So this is about, as it says here, clicking, right? Or helping somebody feel like they're being understood by the way you change and adapt your communication style preference. So as I said, in Myers-Briggs or Insights or all those, they have the 4 personality styles, and social styles uses it as analytical, driver, amiable, and expressive. So analytical is that person who's very fact-driven and serious and exacting in their speech. A driver can be seen as strong-willed and more emotionally controlled. Amiable is typically seen as outgoing and supportive. And an expressive is, easygoing. And then the expressive is described as outgoing and more dramatic. And I think the important part here is nobody is an analytical or a driver or an amiable or an expressive. That's just the preferred style of communication that they use. It's like using a tool, right? You're not a hammer. You just maybe prefer to use it to build with. But that doesn't mean you can't use a saw. And so all 4 of these styles think of them as communication systems or communication styles that you use and can switch between if you don't seem to be getting a result. So let's talk a little bit more about what that really is. So you see on the horizontal line, ask and tell, and on the vertical line, reserved and outgoing. I like to think of reserved and outgoing instead as task for reserved and people for outgoing. It helps me a little more differentiate. So to be ask or tell and task or people. And what this is saying is this is the orientation on the vertical line of how they are oriented, whether they're task or whether they're oriented towards people in a communication. And then the horizontal line is their preferred method of influencing. So somebody that is an ask mode would usually say something along the lines of, who would like to go to a party? ? Whereas a tell oriented would try to influence with a statement. Let's all go to a party, period. And so these 2 dimensions help you determine what way you want to influence and what orientation you have towards people or tasks. And as I'm sure you're reading this, right, you can see maybe yourself in 1 or more of these. And the idea being you pick 1 or 2 preferred styles and you pretty much use those as a signature communication. But again, that doesn't mean you can't move around or use other styles. But it's where you feel most comfortable in using the tool that you're using. So if I'm most comfortable with a hammer or a particular type of hammer, I'm probably going to use that more often than some other tool. So you can see in analytical's primary driver is just to avoid mistakes, whereas a driver is to maintain control. Whereas an expressive is to
Alan,
be recognized, and the amiable wants to be liked.
I'm sorry, Alan,
Hello, yes,
Hi, can I add something to this?
sure.
Okay, so the way I'm seeing it, like I'm a very analytical person. I'm very direct. I like to get as much information as I can up front right away, now, yesterday, but that doesn't always work with everyone, and especially if they're struggling. Like with the veterans that I work with, some of them, they don't they don't really seem to understand what I'm saying. So like with them, I have to really slow down and approach them differently instead of being direct and, wanting to make sure that they understand what I'm saying. Sometimes I really have to slow down and just talk to them in a different way, a different tone of voice, instead of being so, I don't know, direct, like I'm bossing them around. I have to change my tone of voice and say, okay, let's just slow down. Let's take a look at this, and maybe insert some humor in there, to get them to relax a little bit. So you have to, I mean, you not only know what your focus is, but to be able to adjust how you're approaching the other person as well. Does that make sense?
Amen. That's exactly what this talk is about. So you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Thank you very much. So that's what this is about is how do you modify your communication? Well, it starts by knowing what the other communication preferences are, right? So you can see on a driver, they're telling oriented, they interrupt, and they may have a reserved manner, but they're quick to make a decision. Whereas if you're amiable, right, in the quadrant counterpart to it, um, you may be asking lots of questions but not interrupting. In which case, you've got an opposing communication style that's not working for each other. So the point of this is start to identify your own communication style, but then how do we find ways to identify the other person's communication style? And so that's what these lines are. One being the ask and tell is a great one, because if they're asking questions to influence the conversation, then they're using an ask mode, which means they're either amiable or analytical. But if they're using a tell mode or tell style, then they're probably either a driver or an expressive. And so that's the first demarcation point of how you can tell in an interaction with somebody what their communication style is. The second part is, what is their focus of their communication? Is their focus on people, which would be amiable or expressive, or is it on tasks and deliverables, analytical or driver? And so as you're starting to engage with somebody, you can start to ask yourself these questions internally to yourself as to how they're communicating and what they're focusing on. And that'll help you determine in an interview or in a networking event what's most important to this person and what their preferred style of communication is. If it's a driver, it might be okay to interrupt them. They might not see that as a issue at all, but if you do that with an analytical, you may have disrupted their train of thought. So versatility is the ability to be aware of somebody else's style as well as your own and adapt that style to someone else. So this is the slide where you can talk about how to modify. And as I said, I talked through this earlier, but you can change to become more ask directed rather than tell directed. Or you can change your focus consciously from a task of getting stuff done to how people are feeling about that task. So as you see, if it's people directed, you can start engaging with people, ideas, and feelings in the conversation, making sure you're either asking questions or bringing up points that are relevant to the people you're talking to. And so if you're task directed, right, you're focusing on the facts and outcomes and analysis, and you can start modifying your communication to drive towards that. So I'm going to take a quick pause right here. What questions or what thoughts are coming to mind right now as a result of this slide?
Alan, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
In your experience, this is great stuff because I saw some great. I went through some great training kind of around very similar to this quite a few years ago, where they used animals instead of those, instead of like analytical and driver, but they had the same focus. One of the questions I have, like from your experience, is do you find that there's a certain amount of time? The premise in the training I was in before was that, hey, you can't change, your communication style or your personality. You are who you are, but you can alter it for like maybe a couple hours or something like that. In your experience, have you found that there's kind of I guess a prime amount of time that's workable, and then like maybe once you get past that, it's like you start hitting diminishing returns and it gets too hard to do that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that when I'm like, if I'm in a coaching call or if I'm in a meeting or something, and I'm finding that other people are using different communication styles, I personally need to think about the communication style I'm going to use, right? Like I have to consciously analytical or analyze it. Like I don't naturally jump towards people's feelings necessarily, but if I make a conscious effort to do it, I can analyze how they're feeling, but I can modify and say something along the lines of, well, that must not have felt good, right? Or that might have felt awesome to be recognized that way, right? Like I can ask the question in a coaching call or recognize how people are feeling or recognize that feelings are an important part of the conversation. But one of the things that I've noticed, right, is that people don't really know this about me, but I'm actually an analytical when I've taken these tests twice now. And so that means that I'm potentially an introvert, which means that I need downtime to process and regroup my energy. And so, yeah, I can support what you're saying, Adam, is that from my own personal experience, I need some significant alone time or downtime after having been out and engaging, because it takes significant work for me to modify towards somebody's people directedness, right? It's not that I can't do it. It's not that I can't be successful in it. It's just that I have to work harder at it than somebody who's maybe more naturally an amiable or an expressive.
Sure. Yep.
And I can imagine how it would be the same if you try to ask them to do something analytical or, analyze the entire strategy of a plan. They can do it, right? But it's not their preferred communication style, and they're going to take a lot of energy to get to that point.
Yeah. No, it's good, and I think I like what you said there. I think the big takeaway is like, look, don't let it scare you. You can do it. Even just for a little bit of time. I mean, it's everybody here can do it, and then you can go back and have like the recovery time, like you said. I think that's really important, because I mean, if you can identify with people like this on this quadrant, even just for a little bit of time,
Yep.
I mean, that's really going to help your profile a lot. It's good.
Thanks, Adam. Any other thoughts or reflections that are coming up?
I'd like to comment, Al. What I see here, I mean, I love the way this is put together, and I did some pretty intensive 20-minute networking meetings, and the thing I guess that this tied together here, I would love to see this before I did those meetings, but there were some things that I realized and I learned along the way, and because the analytical and the amiable, though amiable is pretty easy going, like you said, but the analytical people don't have a lot of tolerance for nonsense talk. They want to get down to business. And so when I did those 20-minute networking, because of the limited time, that is a focus. And I know they appreciate it, but I'm not really good at judging what kind of person someone is in a short period of time. It takes me a while. So starting out down to business, and us ex-military, we understand how to get down to business and do those tasks at hand.
Yeah.
So it comes a little easier. We're kind of wired that way, but I did learn that starting out structured down to business allows those expressive and driver people to kind of come out of their shell a little bit and say, hey, let's loosen this. It seems a little bit, tight for me. Let's loosen this up a little.
Yeah.
And I did learn that they will tell me what kind of person they are pretty quickly. Where the analytical, they just appreciate it. Okay, what's next? Oh yeah, and then there's this, So I learned to figure out what their conversation method or
Nice.
preferred method is, just by, I guess, by accident more than by design.
That's great, Jeff. Other thoughts right now, or other comments or insights that this is helping with?
I think that's good stuff, Jeff. I think it's like, Alan, I can't help but think it's almost kind of like a quick example that I've had recently is like, think about like if you were when you were talking to the recruiter back in the day, lots of talk, lots of verbiage. It's almost like you're talking to a salesperson, right? Well, we've got a new senior level person here at the bank where I'm working, and he was on a nuclear submarine and a boomer nuclear submarine, and he graduated from nuclear power school. Okay, so he was a nuclear power officer, and he also, when he first got out into the civilian workforce, he worked for McKinsey for many years. So I picked up on very quickly when talking with him, he's kind of like, okay, so what do we want to talk about today? And I could just see him on the submarine where it's like, I've got nuclear missiles around me. I've got a nuclear reactor around me. Everything is by the book. 1, 2, 3, ABC. We double check it, triple check it. Everything's fine. And just go next. What's it? Make sure you're going through your procedures. And I've found that picking up on that quickly, like using the stuff that you have here, was really huge because the conversations I have with him are very productive. Because then he's like, okay, what do we want to do here? And I tell him, say, hey, I'd like to do this. He's like, great. And then it's just boom, boom, boom. We run through it. And it's very valuable. And I've provided it to some other people I know that maybe at the bank that maybe aren't like that, and they like to talk about things a lot. And I try to tell them, okay, just so you know, when you talk to this person, make sure you've got it pretty well thought out about what you want to do, how you want to cover it, and give them the details, but give them the information, but don't, unless he asks for it, don't give him a big storyline. Otherwise, you're gonna probably throw the whole thing off course. So.
Yep.
In the headlines.
I was talking to somebody about this, and they actually were going in for a networking meeting. And based on my questions that I was asking about what they perceived about the person, I was perceiving they were a driver, right? And I said, okay, well, so you're going in for networking, but you better be prepared for an offer, right? Like, what if they say, okay, bottom line, what's it going to take to get you in here? Boom, right? And he was like, well, this is just a networking meeting. I'm like, that's true. But if they're the personality style that I think they are, and they want you, that decision is going to be made pretty quickly, and they're going to move to the next stage. And it's going to happen so quick that you better be prepared. Well, he didn't really think I knew what I was talking about, but he did it anyways. And it was about a few minutes into the conversation, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And he was like, I was so glad I prepared with an offer, like a dollar figure number of what I wanted, right? Because it was a quick move that he made on him in a positive way, but because he'd thought about it and prepared for it, he was ready to go that into the brass tacks of the conversation. So what other thoughts? Any other thoughts or comments while we're here? Good. I will tell you that I learned this from Wilson Learning Worldwide. I don't know if they're still around. I think they are. I think they went through bankruptcy and came back. So you can actually get this from Wilson Learning, or you can also Google it on the link slide that I put above there. But for me, this was the most valuable part of this training, was not to know who I am, but to know how to tell who others are so that I can modify my communication to meet their needs. So here's a quick slide on, and we've been covering this all along, is how to actually change your how to be versatile or change your communication styles to meet somebody who's task directed, right? Focus on the facts, organize your thoughts, and talk about consequences, especially for an analytical, right? I know myself as an analytical, I'm always thinking about the consequences. One of my scenarios that I play is worst case scenario, right? So I always tell myself there's 3 outcomes: better than expected, worse than expected, or about what I expected, or no change, right? So default going in, I've already started thinking about what are the consequences, what do I need to prepare for? And so once I've done that scenario planning, or once I've formed my communication around that, I already know how I'm thinking about the situation, but I already know nobody else is, right? Because so for someone who's people directed, right, I need to pretty much throw that out the window and focus on building rapport. I need to reinforce their ideas and I need to help them break routines, especially if they're an expressive. And then on the tell directed side, right, get to the point. Not 3 slides, 1 slide. Not 17 bullets, 1 bullet. So get to the point and disagree disagreeably. One of the things about this, right, is if they disagree with, or if you're getting a disagreement mode or model or communication style from them, I have to remind myself that they're not disagreeing with me, they're disagreeing with my ideas. And they have a pretty valid reason of it, right? And it's my job to modify my communication to learn what they're disagreeing with in my ideas. Because you got to remember, I've thought them out, and I think I'm pretty well thought out, but maybe I didn't think of everything because I didn't see it from somebody else's perspective. So for me, when they start disagreeing with me, I remind myself they're disagreeing with my ideas, and I want to hear more because they got something valuable to say. And dealing with ask-directed modifications, check in with their feelings first. How are they feeling? And you can ask them directly if the situation calls for it, or you can monitor it, right? What's their facial expression? What's their body language? You can follow the lead of others in the communication, in the circle or in the group, right? Supporting other people's ideas. You can ask in a non-demanding way for cooperation, and they'll happily give it because they want to be supportive. I would caution you to, because my wife is this mode, not to take advantage of it because they are often super supportive to a fault. And if you're not monitoring their feelings of how they're being overloaded, it could be something that's kind of brewing and festering, and it could get you into worse consequences later. So that's why check with their feelings first is the most important part.
So Alan, I just wanted to add to that, and okay,
Yeah.
about checking feelings, for me, that doesn't mean asking them how they feel. Sometimes it's just like you said, get to the point, say what you got to say, and then shut up. And sometimes they will come to their own conclusion and pretty much say, yeah, I agree with you, or no, I don't. But it's hard for me to, when I get going on something, I feel like I have to explain it, get into a whole bunch of detail. I really don't. If I just say what I got to say and then shut up, usually I'll get the desired effect.
I love it. Thanks for that insight. So can you see how this will be useful in an interview or in a networking situation? Or maybe there are times when examples you've got where you actually have used this and didn't know it.
I gotta say, Alan, I saw it in both the networking meetings that I did, and because you have time to do a little research, and LinkedIn is great for that, but LinkedIn doesn't always give you a good idea of what personality they are. You really have to read what's in LinkedIn. Some of their personality will show, but LinkedIn, they're trying to market. So they're following rules and things for marketing themselves, and some of the personality is taken out of it. But the nice thing is you sometimes have company profiles and things you can dig into. Now, when I went for my interview, I was being interviewed with the CEO, the CTO, and the global professional services director. So they had profiles on their website, on the company website, and I read about them. And
Oh, good.
I tell right away, the CTO was that technical guy. He was all about, all task, all, everything was serious and technology and all this. And then, the global professional services was a guy built from the ground up. So I knew he's the, he's the builder, he's the innovator, he's running out there, he's excited, very expressed. And then the CEO was very person directed. So it helped me. It really helped me to know those personalities because it was a 3-part interview divided by those 3, and I knew what I was walking into each time.
Nice. So you had to change each time.
Every time. Each time was a different conversation, very different. But I just put that hat on, ready for it.
How are you?
Love it. Hey, Aaron, your hand is up. Do you want to go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, so I was, because, and I forget the woman that came, I don't know, a month or two ago that walked us through this whole thing. We got someone, if they can put it on mute there.
Yeah.
But,
Hey, could we all check our mute buttons for a sec? We're getting some back talk.
I think that's Melanie.
Hang on, sorry, just a second. Aaron.
It's not me.
No, it's Lana.
I had my mic on, but it wasn't me. Sorry.
Hey, Lana,
Yeah,
can I get you to mute your microphone? Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sorry, go ahead.
so yeah, the woman that came a couple months ago, but and she touched on it, but I guess the question still is, like, I understand these, but specifically with an interview or networking meeting setting, how do you like figure them out within 30 seconds so that you can, okay, boom, I'm going to change my message to task, so you're not coming across as, oh, you think they're warm and cuddly and feeling space. Well, no, they really just want the facts, Jack. I mean, how do we narrow down that response time to pinpoint them in a heartbeat?
That's
Can I jump in on
great
this one?
question. Oh, go ahead. Somebody's talking?
Jeremy, it's Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy, go ahead.
I mean, depends. Are you on? If you're on the phone, I do by tone of voice, right, and how their cadence and their voice is going, right. If they're seeming a little free or more relaxed on the phone, I'm a little more cordial. But if they're short and sweet and to the point, right, as we all in the military are, like clear and concise language, then it's just like task, get to the point. I don't have time for this, stuff like that. But in person, nonverbal expressions is great. But some people cross their arms all the time. They're thinking like myself. But nonverbal communications is a big one for me, and I just see how their body language is. If they're fidgeting a lot, or they're pushing the glasses or something like that. On they want this to speed up, or they get more relaxed, they sit back and stuff like that. That's how I usually go for it. I usually figure about like first 20-30 seconds usually on the phone, but being in person, it's maybe about a minute.
Well, one thing I'll advise people, I'll go back to what I said earlier, that this is a tool, not a box, right? In other words, you may need a hammer 1 minute and a saw the next and a chisel the next, right? So people will pick up different communication styles moment to moment based on how they think they're influencing the conversation or not. So, but generally, if they're just operating in a standard mode, there's two things that I listen for over the span of a conversation is, are they ask directed or are they tell directed? Right? Do they tell me that I need to sit down, or do they ask me to sit down? Right? And then when they were talking, right, is their focus on the people in the conversation or in the situation? Are they worried about the impacts this is going to have on people, or are they worried about the tasks and getting something done? Right? Because if they're focused on getting something done, that puts them in the top two quadrants. They're using the communication style of an analytical or a driver. If they're focusing on ask directed, then they're analytical or amiable, right? So I can triangulate over a period of a conversation, a short conversation, as to where they're coming from. But again, I want to express that you'll see people move around. So, like one sample isn't going to just do it, right? You kind of have to be with them in the moment throughout the conversation and say, what are they using in this moment to try to influence the conversation or to try to get a result that they want? And then that's the adaptation that you make.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, Aaron, lots of times as you go through it, it's how it starts is not how it ends, and especially like if you're doing the 20-minute networking meeting correctly, as you get more practice with it, lots of times at the end, people are might be more amiable and more open to be like, well, I can talk for another 10, 15 minutes if you want to, which is always a good sign. And that, and I would just say that I think is as you do more and more of it, you'll be surprised at how much you will kind of sharpen that skill of picking up on how people are presenting themselves and how you should interact with them.
Is that usable, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, that is the sum total of the quote unquote presentation. So at this point, what other discussion or topics or things I'd be interested in hearing from you, how you can use this in an interview or how you might have used this unconsciously. Or maybe you've used it in leading troops.
Hey, this is Renee. I'd just like to kind of echo what several people have said. I think Jeremy was talking about someone's tone of voice. You know, today we have very few opportunities to see people in person. So it's harder because, you know, before you could walk into someone's office and see what pictures they had on their credenza or little artifacts that they had on their desk. Today we're either in a Zoom meeting and I can see Patrick has a flag behind him. Alan has a lot of family, you know, older antique family photos and certificates, things like that. So I think by being visually observant, but I think it was Jeremy who said be auditorily, if that's even a word, observant, you know, and taking cues from the other person. It's harder now because we're not in person. We don't necessarily see the body language or the whole, you know, room picture, but it can still be done. But you have to listen very carefully, more so nowadays than using the visual cues, I think.
I like that.
Yeah, Renee's absolutely right. And I don't do Zoom calls. Other than this, I don't ever do Zoom calls because it's just, for me, it's just a distraction. And when I'm talking, I tend to not look at the screen. When I'm trying to think and talk at the same time, I'll look up at the wall, or I talk with my hands a lot. And I think, you know, for the person I'm talking to, if I'm on a Zoom call, that can be very distracting for them. So it's just like easier for me to just talk to them on the phone. But you know, like what you were saying before, Alan, about switching gears, you know, in the course of a conversation, just by picking up on cues, you know, like if they're talking, the other person's talking or not talking, and, you know, how do you adjust your own approach, you know, to fit them? With somebody that you kind of know them already, but like if you haven't talked to them in a very long time, you know, this conversation is going to start out amiable, you know, like, how you doing? I haven't talked to you in a long time. So where are you living right now? And how's it going? And it's just a casual conversation. But at some point you got to get to the point, you know, like, why are we even talking? And then I don't know, they bring up things and then you bring up things and it's more casual again. It could switch so quickly though.
Yep.
It's so fast that I don't know, you have to be able to adapt and adjust.
Well, like that person that was coaching is, you know, it seemed to me based on what he was saying about what he perceived that this person was a driver. So I felt, you know, the analytical in me said this guy could make a better than expected offer, right? Like be ready for the best case scenario. Like, and if he does that, right, be ready with your number. Don't go, well, you know, I kind of need to research it and get back to you to kind of, nope. Do your research now and be ready to go, right? And it worked out well, but it took preparation in advance. So, you know, what I do is I'm grateful that this is not Myers-Briggs, which has 16 quadrants, right? There's no way in heck I could remember 16 things about somebody or kind of discern it, right? 4. And I only really need to know 2 things. How are they influencing and what are they focused on? And if I can determine that, I can stay in the moment with them.
Right on.
So that's the presentation for today. I'm going to stop the recording.